Get in the truck. It's 6 miles to Callaway's, and the sun isn't even up." The voice came from a delivery truck that had slowed to a crawl on the gravel verge beside her, its side panels still ghosted with dew. Nora Bexley kept walking. She had walked this road at dawn for 11 months, in rain and frost, and now in the first thick heat of summer. And she had never once said yes to a stranger idling an engine in the half-dark. What she did not know, as she lifted her chin and told him she had 2 good legs, thank you, was that the man behind the wheel already knew her name, and that within the week he would own the very reason she walked this road at all. But that came later. That morning began the way all of them began, at 3:45, in a rented room above a shuttered hardware shop, with the alarm she never actually needed because her body had learned the hour. Nora lay still for one breath in the blue dark. Listening, a blackbird had already started up in the lime tree outside, tuning itself against the silence. The window was open 2 inches, and the air that came through it smelled of warm tarmac cooling, of somebody's honeysuckle 3 gardens over, of the river down past the mill. Summer smells. Even the poor got summer for free. She swung her feet to the boards. The floor was cool and gritty under her heels, and she felt for the light without turning it on, because the light woke Aunt Pemberton across the landing. And Aunt Pemberton needed her sleep more than Nora needed to see her own socks. She dressed by feel. Gray trousers, the ones with the mended knee. A soft shirt gone thin at the elbows. The apron she rolled and pushed into her canvas bag so it wouldn't crease. In the kitchen she drank half a mug of tea standing at the counter. Ate a heel of yesterday's bread with a scrape of jam, and left the other half under a cloth where her aunt would find it. Then she wrote the same 3 words on the pad by the kettle that she wrote every morning. Back by 2. Don't lift the box. The box was a case of tinned things Aunt Pemberton insisted on rearranging, and her hip could not take it. And she would do it anyway the moment Nora was gone. Some kinds of stubbornness ran in families like the shape of a nose. Outside, the street was the color of a pigeon's wing. Nora pulled the door to gently and stepped down onto the pavement, and the town lay quiet around her. The closed baker's she did not work at, the laundrette. The war memorial with its dark wreath of last winter's poppies gone papery. Her own footsteps were the loudest thing in it. The hatchback had given out in April. It sat now in Marsh's yard on the edge of town with a cracked head gasket and a repair bill that came to more than the car was worth, and every week Nora put a little aside in a jam jar toward it. And every week something small came first, her aunt's tablets, the electric, a birthday card, and a folded note for her brother down at the trade college, who thought she was doing fine. She was doing fine. Fine simply took her 6 miles on foot each way and gave her back a pair of boots that were on their 2nd set of soles. She could have asked. That was the thing people never understood. She could have asked the neighbor with the van, or old Fenwick who ran the bakehouse floor, or any of the drivers who passed her every single morning on this road. She had a mouth. She simply would not use it for that. Asking was a door you opened once and then could never quite close again, and Nora had learned young that the people who leaned came to be counted on to lean, and were loved a little less for it. Better to be the one who managed, the one nobody had to worry about. So she walked. The road left the town at the old level crossing and ran out between the hayfields, and this was the part she secretly loved, though she would have died of embarrassment before she said so aloud. The mist sat low over the cut grass like something breathing. Skylarks went up invisibly and spilled their song down over her. The tarmac gave way to a long stretch where the verge was wide and starred with clover, and the smell of it, green, milky, warm, even at this hour, got into the back of her throat and stayed there. Somewhere a cow complained. The sky over the far hills had begun to go the pale bruised pink of the inside of a shell. By the time the light was properly up, she would be at Calloway's with flour to her elbows, and none of this would exist. That was the bargain. You got the world to yourself for 1 hour, and you paid for it with your feet. She was perhaps 2 miles along, at the place where the road dipped and the hawthorn hedge closed in on both sides, when she first heard the engine behind her. She knew the sound of every Calloway van. This was not one of them. This was heavier, newer, the diesel note deeper and better kept, and it came up the road slowly, unhurried, its headlamps throwing her own long shadow out ahead of her across the tarmac. She stepped further onto the verge and kept her eyes down. Clover, dew, the toe of her boot going dark with wet. She waited for it to pass. It did not pass. It slowed. It matched her pace, and a window came down with an expensive electric hum, and that was when the voice said it. Get in the truck. It's 6 miles to Calloway's, and the sun isn't even up. Nora looked. The truck was one of the newer flatbeds, dark green under the dust, and the man leaning across from the driver's seat was not anyone she knew. 35, perhaps, dark hair that needed cutting, pushed back off his forehead by an impatient hand. A jaw that had not seen a razor in a day or two. He wore a plain work shirt with the sleeves shoved up, and his forearms were a driver's forearms, but there was something about the watch on his wrist and the way he held himself, easy and certain, that did not quite fit the shirt. She noticed it the way you notice a wrong note in a tune you know well. She could not have said what it was. "I've got 2 good legs," she said. "Thank you. I can see the legs." He did not smile, exactly, but something moved at the corner of his mouth. "I can also see it's 6 miles, and you're doing it in boots that have been resoled. You can see a lot from a moving truck. I've been behind you since the crossing. You didn't hear me till the dip." He nodded at the road ahead, where it climbed and turned. "There's no verge for the next half-mile. A milk lorry comes through here at 10 past. He's not looking for anybody on foot. Then I'll be sure to look for him." She kept walking. The truck kept crawling. It was, she would admit later, an absurd way to hold a conversation, the two of them moving up an empty road at the speed of a slow stroll, while the mist thinned around them and the larks kept singing as if none of it mattered. "You're being stubborn," he observed. "I'm being early. There's a difference. If I get in a stranger's truck, I've saved my legs. If the stranger's not what he looks like, I've lost a great deal more, and my aunt makes very good tea, and I'd like to keep drinking it." She said it lightly, but she said it. "So thank you. Genuinely, but I don't know you." For the first time he seemed to consider that she might have a point. He let a breath out through his nose, and to her surprise he stopped the truck entirely, put it in neutral, and rested both hands on the wheel. Ahead of them the road ran empty into its pink haze. "Eli," he said, "I'm driving a route this week. First one out of the yard. If it helps, you can watch me pull in behind you at Calloway's and tell yourself you were right not to trust me the whole way there." He glanced sideways at her, and now the almost smile was fuller. Or you could sit in a warm cab for 4 miles and be at the floor before Fenwick's finished shouting about the proving room. Nora stopped walking. It was the detail that did it, not the name, not the smile, the proving room. Fenwick shouted about the proving room every morning of his life, because the thermostat was old and swung 6 degrees either way, and half the loaves came up sulking. And nobody outside the Calloway floor would have known to say it. A stranger passing through did not know about the proving room. "You're new," she said slowly. "I've not seen you." "I'm new," he agreed, "as of this week." She looked at him a moment longer. The blackbird, or its cousin, sang in the hawthorn. Her feet, if she was honest, had begun somewhere around the crossing to make the particular complaint they made every day at exactly this point, the one she had trained herself not to hear. 4 miles was 4 miles, and there was a milk lorry, and there was no verge, and he had known about the proving room. "If you take one wrong turn off this road," she said, "I'm out at the lights, and I'll walk the rest and think very poorly of you." "Understood, and you'll hear my whole opinion of men who slow their trucks down beside women in the dark. I'm already braced for it." He reached across and pushed the passenger door open. Warm air came off the cab, engine warm, smelling of diesel and coffee and, faintly, of the cardboard flats stacked on the bed behind. "Get in, Nora." She had her hand on the door and one boot up on the step before it landed on her, cold and complete, and she went very still. "I didn't tell you my name," she said. Something crossed his face, a flicker, quickly folded away, the look of a man who has taken a corner slightly too fast and corrected before anyone in the back seat noticed. "It's on your bag," he said. "The tag. N. Bexley." She looked down. It was, in fact, on her bag, a little luggage tag Aunt Pemberton had laced on with garden twine so it wouldn't get muddled with June's identical canvas one on the peg. N. Bexley in her aunt's careful hand. He could have read it. It was right there. It was right there, and he had read it from the driver's seat of a moving truck, in the dark, at the speed of a slow walk, without once seeming to look away from the road or from her face. "Right," she said, not quite believing it, and got in. The cab settled her the way a warm room settles you when you have not known how cold you were. She pulled the door shut. He put the truck in gear, and it rolled forward smoothly onto the empty road. And the ache in her feet let go all at once, so suddenly that she had to press her lips together and look hard out of the window at the passing hedge. "There's coffee in the flask," he said, "if your principles will allow it." My principles are flexible about coffee. She poured half a cap and held it in both hands. It was good coffee, better than the tin of it that lived by the Callaway urn. And that was another wrong note, quietly filed with the watch in the forearms and the way he drove, both hands, mirrors, everything, like a man used to being responsible for whatever he moved. "You drove trucks before this?" "I've driven a bit of everything." He kept his eyes on the road. "Tell me about Callaway's. I like to know where I'm delivering. You could ask Fenwick. Fenwick will tell me the routes and the loading order. I want the other thing." He changed down for the bend, gentle, and the milk lorry went past them the other way with a hiss and a wall of light, exactly as he'd said it would, and Nora watched it go and said nothing about it, and neither did he, which she respected. "I want to know what it's like." "You've been there. How long?" "Coming up on a year." She turned the cap in her hands. "It's a good place. That's the truth, and you'll not hear me say it about many. Old Mr. Callaway started it with 2 ovens and a handcart, and he built it into something that feeds half the county before breakfast, and he never once forgot a name on that floor. Not one. He knew whose mother was poorly. He knew who was saving for what." She stopped because her voice had done something she hadn't given it permission to. "We lost him at the back end of last year. He'd stepped back a long while before, but still, it's not been the same air to breathe since." Eli's hands were quiet on the wheel. "No," he said, "I'd imagine not." "And now there's the grandson." She said the word the way you'd hold up something you weren't sure was clean. "Off in the city, some business or other, made his own money and never so much as smelled the flour, and now the whole place is his by a line in a will. We've none of us set eyes on him. Fenwick says he's coming to review operations." She did the two words in a voice that was not quite her own, dry and folded-armed, which everyone on the floor knows is the polite way of saying he'll sell the ovens for scrap and put flats up on the field, or cut the dawn shift to save the wages, and either way the six of us who walk in at 5 will be walking somewhere else by autumn. The truck ran on. The fields were gold now at their tops, where the sun had finally cleared the hills, and the mist was going to smoke. And somewhere ahead the first gray roofs of the Callaway yard showed through the trees. "That's what they say, is it?" Eli said, very evenly. "That's what they say." Nora set the empty cap back on the flask and screwed it down. "I don't say it. I've never met the man. But I'll tell you what I think, since you asked what it's like." She looked out at the field, going gold. "I think a man who never smelled the flour won't understand what he's holding, and I think the old one would be sick to his stomach if he could see his name over a car park. That's what it's like. It's a good place with a shadow coming for it, and none of us that love it get a vote." For a while he didn't answer. The truck slowed for the turn, and the Callaway gate came up on the left, the long, low bakehouse behind it, lit yellow from inside, the loading bays already open, and the first vans nosed in, and the smell reaching them even through the glass now. That smell she would have known, blindfolded at the bottom of the sea, hot crust and yeast and scorched sugar, and the particular sweet dark of a place that had been baking bread since before either of them was born. "You love it," he said. It wasn't a question. "This place. I love that it's honest." She gathered her bag onto her lap. "You put your hand in at 5, and you take your money at 2, and nobody owes anybody a thing. There's not much in a life you can say that about." He pulled the truck through the gate and into the yard, and the moment the tires crossed onto the cobbles, something changed in the shape of the morning, though Nora was looking at her own boots and did not see it yet. She was thinking about the proving room, and about her name on the tag, and about how she was going to have to admit to June that she had, after 11 months, finally gotten a truck. Then Fenwick came out of the loading bay wiping his hands on his apron, and he saw the dark green flatbed, and he stopped dead in the middle of the yard, the way a man stops when the thing he has been dreading arrives early and parks in front of him. "Come on, then," Nora said, reaching for the door handle, half laughing now, warm, grateful, entirely unaware. "I'll show you where to sign the sheet." Fenwick bites in the morning, but he's soft as a proved loaf by 10. You'll, Nora, something in the way he said it stopped her hand on the handle. Across the yard, Fenwick had pulled the cap from his head, not touched it. Pulled it clean off, the way men of his age had been taught to do at church, or at a graveside, or in front of the one person in a place whose good opinion they could not afford to lose. He was holding it against his chest with both hands, and he was not looking at Nora at all. He was looking past her at the driver's seat, and his weathered face had gone the careful blank of a man arranging himself very fast. "Morning, Mr. Callaway," Fenwick said. "We we didn't have you down till Thursday, sir." The word went through the cab like cold water down a collar. Nora turned very slowly in her seat. Beside her, the man who had said his name was Eli, the new driver, first one out of the yard, had both hands still resting on the wheel, and he was looking at her now with something in his face that was not quite an apology and not quite anything else, something braced and steady and sorry and unmistakably, impossibly, the same certainty she had heard in his voice from the moment he slowed the truck on the empty road and told her to get in. "You said your name was Eli," she said. Her voice had gone very quiet. "It is," he said. "Elias," a pause, "the length of one heartbeat. Elias Calloway." Out in the yard, Fenwick was still holding his cap against his chest, and the whole dawn shift had begun, one by one, to appear in the mouth of the loading bay behind him, June and old Marsh from packing, and Dot with her arms folded and her eyebrows climbing. All of them staring at the green truck, at the owner of every oven and every cobble and every wage packet in the place, and at Nora Bexley in the passenger seat beside him with her mended knee and her resoled boots, and every word she had just said about the grandson from the city still hanging in the warm and flowery air. For a moment, nobody in the yard moved. The word sat there in the warm air with the smell of the crust and the yeast, and Nora felt it settle into her the way flour settles into a bowl, silently changing the weight of everything. "Elias Calloway," she repeated. Her voice was very level, which anyone who knew her would have understood to be the most dangerous thing it could be. Yes, the grandson from the city. She was still holding her canvas bag on her lap, both hands folded on it the way you hold something to stop it shaking. Made his own money. Never smelled the flour. That one. He had not moved his hands from the wheel. To his credit, and she would grant him that word only much later, grudgingly, and never to his face, he did not look away from her, and he did not soften it, and he did not reach for the 1,000 easy things a lesser man reaches for. He simply let her look at him, and let the whole of what she had said in the last 4 miles come back and stand between them in the cab. "Let me out," she said. "Nora, let me out of the truck, Mr. Calloway." He unlocked the door. She heard the soft, expensive clunk of it, the same electric hum that had let the window down on the empty road an hour ago when she had still been a woman with 2 good legs and no idea whose coffee she was about to drink. She got down onto the cobbles with as much dignity as a person can manage when their knees have gone unreliable, and she shut the door with a quietness that was worse than a slam, and she walked across the yard toward the loading bay with her chin up and her ears roaring, and every single member of the dawn shift watching her come. Nora, that was June, low, out of the side of her mouth, falling into step. Nora, was that? Yes. And you were, yes, June in the truck. With, "If you say one more word," Nora told her, still walking, still smiling the terrible level smile, "I will put you in the proving room and turn the thermostat up myself." June, who had known her long enough to measure weather, shut her mouth. But her eyes were bright as a magpie's, and Nora knew with a sinking certainty that the story of how N. Bexley had spent 11 months refusing every ride on that road and then climbed into the owner's cab on the very morning he arrived to review operations would be told at every tea break between now and the harvest. Behind her she heard the truck door open and shut, unhurried, and Fenwick's voice climb into the strained brightness men use with a boss they have not yet taken the measure of. "We've the order sheets in the office. Mr. Calloway, whenever you're. We can go through the loading, the routes, whatever suits, in a while. Fenwick, let the floor get the first bake out. I'll not stand over anyone's morning." It was, Nora thought bitterly, exactly the right thing to say. It was the thing old Mr. Calloway would have said. It made Fenwick's shoulders come down 1/2 an inch. And she hated, with a sudden clean fury that surprised her, that he had known to say it, that the man who had let her believe he was nobody had that in his pocket the whole time and had chosen, for 4 miles, to spend it on her. The bakehouse swallowed her, and she let it. Inside, the ovens threw their heat like a wall you walked into and were grateful for, and the long steel tables were dusted white, and the proving racks stood in their corner breathing their yeasty sourness, and the wireless on the shelf played too quietly to hear over the mixers. She tied her apron. She washed to the elbow in water hot enough to sting. And she put her hands into the day's first dough and began to work it, and the tears that had been standing in her all the way across the yard did not fall, because she would not let them. Because there was bread to make, and because he was somewhere behind her in the building, and she would sooner have walked the 6 miles home barefoot over the clover than let Elias Calloway see the back of her. Neck go pink. You couldn't have known, June murmured, flowering the next table. I told him the old man would be sick to see his name over a car park. Nora turned the dough, folded it, leaned her weight in. I told him none of us that love the place get a vote. I did the voice, June. I did the review operations voice. June made a sound that she quickly turned into a cough. Did you? With the folded arms. Oh, Nora, he let me. He sat there and let me do the whole turn. The heel of her hand went into the dough. That's the part. He could have said it at the crossing. Morning. I'm the man who owns the road you're walking down. He let me get all the way in. Across the room, the swing door opened, and the temperature of the whole floor changed, the way it does when the person everyone is pretending not to watch walks in. Nora did not turn round. She heard him stop just inside the door. She heard him not say anything for a moment, taking it in, the heat, the racks, the white tables, the 6 people who fed half the county before breakfast, all of them suddenly very absorbed in their hands. Morning, Elias said to the room. I'm not here to stand over you. Old Marsh, is it you've the packing? And Dot on the tins. He was reading them off the way you read a list you have studied. I'll be in and out this week. I'd rather you forget I'm here as much as you're able. That'll be easy, sir, said Dot, who feared nothing on this earth. Now we know what you look like. There was a dangerous half-second. Then Elias laughed, a real one, short and surprised out of him, and the floor breathed, and Nora, folding her dough, was furious to find that the laugh had been a good sound, warm and unguarded, the same voice that had said, "Get in." Nora on the road when she still thought he was carrying flats for a wage. Fair, he said. Fair enough. He came down the length of the floor. She knew it, by the way. June suddenly needed a great deal of flour on the far table and drifted off to get it. Traitor, coward, leaving a Nora-shaped gap at the steel. He stopped on the other side of it. She kept her eyes on her hands. You're good at that, he said quietly. The folding. You'll want the office, she said, for reviewing operations. He was silent a moment. I deserved that. You deserve a great deal more than that, and you'll get it, but not here, because this is my table and there's 40 loaves to prove, and I'll not have them fall because you want to feel less of a... She stopped herself, divided the dough, reached for the scraper. I've work. Nora, he put one hand flat on the steel, not near hers, but there, so she'd have to see it. A good hand, she noticed against her will, flowered now at the side where he'd brushed the table, a scar across one knuckle. I didn't set out to trick you. I slowed the truck because it's 6 miles, and there was a lorry due, and you'd resoled your boots. That's all it was. At the crossing. And then you started to talk, and I, a breath, I wanted to hear it. What it was actually like. From someone who'd say the true thing to a stranger. Nobody says the true thing to Elias Calloway. I found that out fast. So you kept the stranger on. For the true thing. Yes, no dressing on it. It was selfish, and I knew it was selfish somewhere around the 2nd mile, and I did it anyway, and I'm sorry. Not for the ride. For the 4 miles I let you spend it, not knowing. She looked up then, because the apology was better than she wanted it to be, and that made it worse. His face was doing the braced and sorry thing again, the corrected corner thing, and behind it. She saw it now, with the light of the ovens full on him, and no dusk to hide in. There was something tired, something older than 35. The look of a man who had learned to expect that people spoke to him in a particular careful way, and had just spent 4 miles being spoken to like a human being, and did not want to give it back. "Why are you really here?" she said. "And don't say review operations." For the first time he hesitated, and it was not the practiced hesitation of a man choosing which true thing to hand over. It was the real kind. And whatever he might have said, he never got the chance. Because the office door at the end of the floor opened, and a second person came out onto the bakehouse floor. And this one, Nora had never seen either. And this one changed the air in a different way entirely. Colder, thinner, a drought off a marble step. He was younger than Elias, and dressed the way the city dresses when it wants the country to feel underdressed. A soft gray suit with no tie, shoes that had never met a cobble before this morning, and plainly resented it, a slim leather folder under one arm. He came down the floor, picking his footing between the flour drifts, and he was smiling, and his smile was the worst thing about him. "There you are," he said to Elias, "warm as anything, cold as a tap. You vanished from the hotel at 4 in the morning. I had to hear from the yard foreman that you'd driven yourself in on a delivery truck." A small laugh, shared with the room, inviting the room to find it charming. He does this. "Ladies and gentlemen, your new proprietor, who owns a car worth more than this building and chooses to arrive on a flat bed at dawn. It's a whole personality. Marcus," Elias's voice had changed, not louder, flatter. "This is the floor. They're working, and I'd never dream of stopping them." Marcus turned the smile on the room, on Fenwick, on Dot, and last of all, lingering, on Nora, on her apron, her mended knee, the flour to her elbows, in a single unhurried sweep that priced her and set her down again. Marcus Wren. I handle the numbers Elias finds boring. Which is all of them. He set the leather folder on the end of the clean steel table, exactly where it had no business being, and Nora felt Dot bristle 3 feet away. "Don't mind me. I'm just here to understand what we've got, before we decide what we do with it." "We're not deciding anything this week," Elias said. "Of course not." Marcus's agreement was smooth as a poured thing. Not deciding, just understanding. The dawn shift, for instance. He said it lightly, opening the folder, running one finger down a column Nora could not see. 6 staff, in at 5, out at 2. The premium on those hours is really quite remarkable when you set it against the margin on a morning loaf. I keep meaning to ask someone who'd actually know. The finger stopped. The smile came up, aimed, this time precisely at her. "You'd know, wouldn't you? You look like a woman who understands what a thing costs." The whole floor had gone still. Even the mixers seemed to drop their voices. Nora looked at the finger on the column, and the soft gray suit, and the shoes that resented the cobbles, and she thought of the jam jar on her aunt's counter with the head gasket money in it, and the note folded into her brother's birthday card, and the 5 other people on this floor who walked in at dawn and had mothers who were poorly and things they were saving for, every one of whose names old Mr. Calloway had carried in his head to the end. "I understand exactly what a thing costs," she said, "better than most. That's why I'd never leave the cost off a sheet and call it a margin." Somewhere behind her, Dot made a small sound like a kettle deciding to boil. Marcus's smile did not move, but something behind his eyes took a note. "And you are?" "On the clock," Nora said, and turned back to her dough. There was a silence with a great deal in it. Then Marcus laughed, closed the folder, and lifted it off the clean steel with 2 fingers, as though it were the table that had contaminated the folder and not the other way round. "Charming," he said, to the room, to Elias, to no one. "You've a floor full of poets, Eli. Poets don't balance, but they do make a lovely noise. Office, when you're finished playing delivery man, there are figures you actually need to see." And he picked his way back up the floor between the flower drifts and was gone, and the swing door sighed shut behind him, and the temperature came slowly back up to bread warm. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Fenwick, from over by the ovens, said to nobody, "First bake's ready to draw," and the floor exhaled and moved again, and Nora scraped her dough onto the peel with hands she was pleased to see were steady. Elias had not moved from the other side of her table. When she risked a glance at him, his jaw was tight, and his eyes were on the swing door where Marcus had gone. And there was something in his face she recognized, because she had felt it herself an hour ago in the cab, watching a green truck she had trusted turn out to be something else. The look of a man realizing, slightly too late, exactly what he has brought into a room. "He works for you," she said. It was not a question, but it wanted to be. "He works for the company." Elias said it carefully. "He's been through 3 of my grandfathers, through 3 places like this. He's very good at what he does. And what he does," Nora said, "is find the poets and take them off the sheet." Elias didn't answer that, which was an answer. "Draw the bake, Fenwick's shouting," she said, and reached past him for the second tray, and this time when her arm came near his hand, he moved it off the steel, and she noticed that too, and hated that she noticed. By 8 the sun was high and hard over the yard, and the first vans were loaded and gone, and the floor had the loose, flowery, aching good humor of people who have got the worst of the day behind them before most of the town has had its tea. Nora took her 10 minutes on the back step with a mug and the heat coming up off the cobbles in a shimmer. And June found her there, of course, and sat down beside her without being asked and bumped her shoulder. "So," June said, "don't. 6 miles you've walked, in the rain, in the frost, and never once, June. And the one morning you get in a truck, it's him." June was delighted. June was going to dine on this for a decade. "It's like something off the wireless. It's like nothing off the wireless. It's a man who let me make a fool of myself for 4 miles because he wanted to hear the true thing." Nora blew on her tea. "And now there's the other one." The suit. June's delight went out like a lamp. "Aye," she said. The suit. She looked out across the shimmering yard toward the office windows, where 2 shapes stood, one leaning, one still. Martian Packing had a cousin at the Harlow Mill 3 years back. Same sort of business, old family place, grandson inherited. Brought a man like that in to understand what they'd got. She did the fingers, unconsciously, the way Nora had done the voice in the cab. "Mill's a block of flats now. Nice ones. There's a plaque says what used to be there." Nora said nothing. The tea was too hot, and she drank it anyway. "He'll not let that happen," June said. But she said it the way you say a thing you want to be true. "The young Mr. Calloway, he got in a truck at 4 in the morning to smell the place." "That's not a flats man. A flats man does it from the city over the telephone. Or," Nora said, "a flats man drives out at dawn to look at what he's about to sell, so he can tell himself he gave it a fair chance." She turned the mug in her hands. "He knew about the proving room, June. He'd done his reading. You don't read up on the proving room to save it. You read up on it to price it." It was, she would think later, an unkind thing to have said, and she was not even sure she believed it. But she had climbed into that cab a woman who managed, who leaned on nobody, who kept her own counsel and her own name, and she had come out of it having handed a stranger 4 miles of her true heart. And the sting of that was still in her, and it had to go somewhere. "He looked at you, though," June said slyly, recovering on the floor. "When you gave the suit both barrels, he looked at you like, 'Finish your tea.' Like a man who's just found the one honest weather vane in a county of broken ones. June, I will tell Fenwick you called his proving room broken." But June only grinned, and the grin was infectious even now, even with the office windows watching, and Nora felt her own mouth threaten to go along with it, and pressed it flat and lost anyway, and the two of them sat on the warm back step in the high summer light and laughed, quietly, the way you laugh at the edge of something you can't yet see the shape of. She did not know that inside the office the shape was already being drawn. She did not hear Marcus Wren say, in the poured, smooth voice, "The Dawn Premium's the easy 60,000, Eli, and you know it. Cut the early shift, run 1 bake later, buy your morning trade off the wholesaler like everyone else in this county. Nobody who matters will taste the difference." She did not hear Elias, at the window, watching 2 women laugh on a back step, say nothing for long enough that Marcus looked up from his folder. She did not hear Marcus add, more gently, in the tone men use when they are being reasonable at you, "You can keep the sign over the door." Sentiment's cheap. It's the 6 of them at 5 o'clock that costs you. Or hear him tap the column with 1 finger and say the thing that would sit under the whole of the summer to come, start with the walker. The one with the boots and the opinions. If she goes quietly, the rest will follow. If you want, I'll have a reason on paper by Friday. There's always a reason on paper. What Nora knew on the back step was that her 10 minutes were up. She tipped the last of her tea onto the cobbles, where it steamed and vanished, and she stood, and her feet made their small complaint about the 6 miles still to come at the end of the day, and she went back in to the heat and the flour and the honest work that owed nobody anything. At 2 o'clock she untied her apron, rolled it, pushed it into her bag beside the tag with her name on it, and went out through the yard into the flat white heat of the afternoon. The walk home was the hard one, the sun overhead, no mist to love, the tarmac giving its stored heat back through the soles of boots on their second set. She had done it 200 times. She squared herself to it at the gate the way she always did. The green flatbed was parked just outside, in the shade of the wall, and Elias Calloway was leaning against it with his arms folded and his sleeves still shoved up, waiting. "I'm not getting in the truck," she said, before he could speak, and walked past him onto the road. "I know." He fell into step beside her, on foot on the hot verge, his good shoes going gray with dust that plainly cost more than her boots. "I thought I'd walk a bit of it, if that's allowed." "It's a public road." "It is." He matched her pace. For a while they went along in silence, the clover gone limp in the heat, a tractor droning somewhere over the hedge, and Nora waited for the pitch, the ride. The apology, the smooth, reasonable thing, and it did not come, and the not coming of it was its own kind of pressure. "He wants to cut the dawn shift," she said finally, because she could not bear to have it circling. "You're Marcus, doesn't he?" Elias walked 3 steps before he answered. "He wants a lot of things. That's not a no." "No." He agreed. "It's not a no." He stopped, there in the middle of the empty afternoon road, where the hedge closed in, at nearly the same spot where he had slowed the truck 12 hours before in a different life, and she stopped too, because it would have been childish not to. The heat sat on both of them. Somewhere the skylark she'd heard at dawn, or its afternoon shift, went up thin and high. "I'm going to tell you the truth," he said, "because you're the only one here who's told me any. I came to decide whether to sell it. That's why I read up on the proving room. You had that exactly right, and it's been under my collar since 8 o'clock. He looked at her, tired, level, sorry. None of it performed. I hadn't decided. I still haven't. But I'll tell you what's changed since 4 this morning, and you can think as poorly of me as you like for it being this late. I got in that truck ready to be reasonable about a building. And then a woman with resoled boots got in beside me and told me it was the only honest air she had to breathe, and did the voice, and meant every word. And now I have to decide it knowing what it costs the 6 of you instead of not knowing. Marcus would tell you that's a weakness. He's downstairs right now, building me a reason on paper so I won't have to feel it. The road shimmered. Nora's heart was doing something complicated, and she did not thank it for the timing. "And will you take it?" she said. The reason on paper. He held her eyes a moment longer than was comfortable. "Ask me on Friday," he said. And then, quieter, the almost smile gone entirely now, "He wants me to start with you. Did you gather that?" The walker with the opinions. "If you go quietly," he says, "the rest follow." A pause, the length of one heartbeat, the same pause he'd left before Calloway in the yard. "I'm telling you that so you'll not be blindsided by a letter. Whatever else I am, I'll not do it to you the way I did the truck. You'll see it coming, from me to your face. That much you have." He stepped back off the road, onto the verge, giving her the way ahead. And Nora Bexley stood in the hammering summer light with 4 miles of hot tarmac in front of her, and a name on a tag in her bag, and a man behind her who owned every oven she loved, and had just told her, plainly to her face, that on Friday he might take it all, and found, to her fury and her fear, that the thing she felt most was not the walk, and not the threat, and not even the 60,000 reasons on paper waiting in the cool office behind them. It was that she believed him, and she did not yet know which of the things he'd said she believed. Thursday arrived under a sky already white, with heat by 7, and it brought Marcus Wren back onto the floor with a clipboard and a small silver stopwatch he clicked in the palm of his hand like a man keeping a beetle for company. Nobody had asked him to be there. That was rather the point of him. He stood at the end of the long steel table in his soft gray suit, out of the flower's reach. And he watched Dot fill the tins, and he clicked the stopwatch when she started, and clicked it again when she finished, and he wrote a number in his folder and said nothing at all, which was worse than anything he could have said. "Don't mind me," he said, when Dot's shoulders went stiff. "Carry on exactly as you would. I'm only learning the rhythm of the place." "You're learning it with a watch," said Dot. "I find a watch tells the truth even when people are too kind to." He smiled. He clicked. "It's nothing personal. It's arithmetic. Arithmetic's the only thing in this building that doesn't have an opinion." Nora kept her eyes on her dough and her hands on her work, and she felt the stopwatch land on her the way you feel a drought find the back of your neck. She did not have to look to know he had crossed the floor and set himself at the corner of her table, and she did not have to look to know he had clicked. "You're the quickest on the folding," he observed, pleasant as milk. "I've timed the others. You're a full third faster, and your loaves rise truer. Did you know that?" "I knew the loaves rise true. I don't need a watch for it." "No, but you see, that's the tragedy of a place like this." He turned a page. The stopwatch clicked. "A woman with your hands could earn twice what Calloway's pays in a plant with proper machines and never walk 6 miles to do it. You're subsidizing sentiment with your own 2 feet. I find that almost unbearable to watch, and I've a very strong stomach." The heat of the ovens sat on the whole floor. Somewhere the proving racks breathed their sour warmth, and the wireless murmured under the mixers, and June, 3 tables down, had gone very still with her hands buried in flour. "You've a number for everything," Nora said, She did not stop folding. "Have you a number for what half the county eats for breakfast if the 6 of us aren't in at 5? The wholesaler in Harlow does a perfectly good morning loaf. Click. Nobody who matters will taste the difference. That's not cruelty, Miss Bexley. It's mercy with a calculator." He closed the folder softly. "I'll leave you to it. I only wanted to see the famous hands. You're everything he said you were." He let that sit. Ask him what he said. Sometime it's illuminating, hearing a man describe the person he's decided about. And he clicked the stopwatch one last time, as if timing her heart, and picked his way back up the floor between the flour drifts, and was gone. Nora divided her dough into 40 even pieces, without pausing once, which took a steadiness she did not feel, and only when the office door had sighed shut did she let herself breathe out through her nose, long and slow, the way old Mr. Calloway used to when a batch came up wrong and he was choosing not to say so. The person he's decided about. She turned the phrase over and did not like a single side of it. By the time she reached home at 2, the tarmac had given back so much stored heat that her boots felt lined with it, and the town shimmered, and the War Memorial's papery poppies had curled another degree in the sun. She let herself into the cool dark of the stairwell above the shuttered hardware shop, and stood a moment with her forehead against the plaster, which was the one cold thing in the building, and then she went up. Aunt Pemberton was at the kitchen table, with the tin things spread around her in a fortress, having lifted the box, of course. And she looked up with the bright, unrepentant face of a woman caught in the act and pleased about it. "Don't," Nora said. "Start. I moved it an inch at a time." Aunt Pemberton patted the chair beside her. "Sit. You've a face on you like a Friday, and it's only Thursday. Tell me who's put it there." So Nora sat, and did not tell her, not the whole of it, not the stopwatch, not the man on the road who owned the ovens, because you did not hand your worries to a woman whose hip could not lift a box of tins. You kept them, the way you kept everything, in the jar where they belonged. She told her the bread had gone well. She told her the honeysuckle 3 gardens over was nearly finished. She got up and put the kettle on, and while it climbed toward the boil, she looked at the jam jar on the shelf with the head gasket money folded inside it, and at the birthday card propped by it, addressed in her own hand to her brother at the trade college, with the folded note inside that said everything was fine. "There's a letter come for you," Aunt Pemberton said, "from the college. Robert's. On the side there." Nora opened it standing up. Her brother's round young writing, full of a term's news, a bursary he might get, a girl he wasn't going to mention and mentioned twice, and at the bottom, underlined, "Don't send any more money, Nor. I mean it this time. You've done enough. Come and see the workshop when the car's mended. I want to show you the thing I made." She folded it back along its creases very carefully, because her hands had begun to do the thing they had not done in the yard. The kettle climbed and clicked off. Steam stood in the hot kitchen air. Outside a blackbird ran down its evening scale, the same bird or its brother from the lime tree. And Nora stood with her brother's letter in one hand and looked at the jar and thought, for the first time in 11 months, a thought she was ashamed of before it had even finished forming, that there were people who would pay, quite a lot, to make a loose thread go quietly. She put the thought back in its jar and screwed the lid down and made the tea. She found out how much the very next morning, and not from Elias. She had come in at 5 as always, walked the 6 miles as always, arrived with the mist still burning off the hayfields, and her boots dark to the ankle with dew, and she had the first bake half proved when the office door opened and Marcus Wren came down the floor alone, without his stopwatch, carrying instead a single cream envelope held flat on his palm like something on a tray. "Miss Bexley." A word. when you can spare your hands." He glanced at the racks. "They'll keep 4 minutes. I've time to prove." She wiped her hands on her apron and did not follow him, so he came to her, which she noted, and which he noted her noting. "I'll be brief, because I respect brevity, and I suspect you do too." He set the envelope on the clean steel, the same corner where he had set his folder on the first morning, the corner dot still wiped twice after him. "That is an offer. It's generous. I made it generous on purpose, because generous things go quietly, and I've no appetite for a fuss." He tapped it once. 3 months' wages, paid on the day you sign. A reference in Mr. Calloway's own hand, his grandfather's name still opens doors in this county, you'd be surprised. And enough, I should think, to mend a certain car sitting in Marsh's yard with a cracked head gasket. He smiled at her stillness. "Yes, I do my reading too. It's the only part of the job I enjoy." The floor had gone quiet around them the way it does. Nora did not touch the envelope, and in return she said, "You resign. Today, of your own free will, no blame to anyone, a woman moving on to better things." He spread his hands. "And you say a kind word to the other 5. Because they listen to you, don't trouble to deny it. I've watched them turn to your table like plants to a window. If the quickest pair of hands leaves smiling, the rest decide the water's fine. The dawn shift closes without a single hard word said, and everyone keeps their dignity, and half the county still gets its loaf, only from Harlow." He lowered his voice, kind as a razor. "You'd be doing them a mercy, Miss Bexley. The slow way is letters, one by one, and no reference, and no envelope. I'm offering you the quick way and the money both. That almost never happens. I'd take it before I changed my mind." Nora looked at the cream envelope on the clean steel, and she thought of the jar, and her brother's underlined line, and her aunt's hip, and the second set of soles worn nearly through, and the whole hot, honest world of the floor breathing behind her. "Does he know you're standing here?" she said. "Mr. Calloway signs what I put in front of him." Marcus's smile didn't move. He's a busy man with a soft heart, which is a costly thing to be. I spare him the parts he finds unpleasant. That's what I'm for. He nudged the envelope a half-inch toward her. "Think about it over the weekend. But think quietly. If word gets round the floor that I've made the offer before you've decided, it stops being your good news and becomes everyone's bad news, and then nobody keeps their dignity, least of all you." He straightened. 4 minutes. Your proof's fine, by the way. It always is. He left the envelope where it lay and picked his way back up the floor, and the swing door sighed and the racks breathed, and Nora stood looking at 3 months' wages and a mended car and a way out that cost her only everyone. She did not open it. She put it in her bag, beside the tag with her name on it, because leaving it on the steel felt like agreeing to something, and carrying it felt like at least being the one who decided when. And she went back to her dough, and her hands were not as steady as she would have liked, and June drifted over with a look, and Nora said, before June could ask, "Not now." "Please, not now." June, who could read weather, floured the table in silence and stayed near, which was its own kind of answer. The envelope sat in her bag through the whole of the morning, warm against the rolled apron, and it was still there when the office door opened again just before the last bake, and this time it was Elias who came out onto the floor, in his shoved-up sleeves, with flour already on him from the loading bay. And he had a look on his face that Nora had not seen before. Not braced, not sorry, but lit. Almost the way a man is lit when he has won an argument he expected to lose. "Fenwick," he said, "get everyone." Marsh, Dot, the lads on the vans, everyone, 2 minutes. They gathered by the ovens, floury and wary, wiping their hands, and Marcus came to the office door and leaned in it with his folder, and did not come down. And Nora stood at the back with her bag and its warm secret against her hip. I'll keep it short, because you've loaves in. Elias put his hands in his pockets, took them out again, a young man's gesture in an old man's building. There have been questions this week about the dawn shift, whether it stays. You've all heard the version where it doesn't. He glanced, just once, at the office door. So I'll say it in front of you, so there's no letter and no rumor. The dawn shift stays. The 5 o'clock start stays. The morning bake is made here, in this building, by these hands, the way my grandfather made it, and it is not going to Harlow, and it is not going anywhere. That's decided. That's it. That's all I came to say. For a moment, nobody moved. Then Dot said, well, in the tone of a woman who had prepared for a fight and been handed flowers. And old Marsh grinned his gappy grin, and Fenwick pulled his cap off again, only this time he put it straight back on and cleared his throat hard and said, right then, first van's in 10, because he was not a man who could be seen to be moved and getting away with it. And the floor came up all at once into a warmth that had nothing to do with the ovens, a loose, glad noise of relief. And June grabbed Nora's arm and squeezed it hard, and Nora felt the noise wash over her, and could not, for the life of her, make herself join it, because there was a cream envelope in her bag that said the dawn shift might stay, and Nora Bexley still would not. Elias found her at the back step 10 minutes later, where she had gone to breathe. The yard shimmered. The heat came up off the cobbles in a wall, and the smell of hot crust drifted out through the open bay behind them, and a wood pigeon went on and on in the wall tree about nothing at all. You didn't cheer, he said. He came and stood a careful arm's length off, looking out at the yard rather than at her, which she was grateful for. I don't cheer. Ask June. It's a defect of character. You looked like a woman who'd been handed good news and couldn't spend it. He turned then. In the hard light he looked tired and pleased and unsure all at once, and there was a smudge of flour along his jaw where he'd rubbed it, and she wanted absurdly to reach up and take it off, and did not. I did it because of you, he said. I want you to know that, whatever else happens. I sat in that office at 4 this morning with the figures and Marcus's reason on paper in front of me, and I heard you doing the voice. None of us that love it get a vote. So I gave you one. The whole shift. That's your vote. Cast. You shouldn't have told me that. Her voice had gone unsteady, and she hated it. Now I have to carry it. Carry what? And there it was, the moment where she should have said, there's an envelope in my bag with your reference in it, an amended car, and everyone I work with sold for 3 months' wages. And she opened her mouth to say it. She got as far as drawing the breath. And he moved half a step nearer, close enough now that she could smell the diesel and coffee and warm flour of him. Close enough that the pigeon and the ovens and the whole shimmering yard seemed to drop their voices, and he lifted one hand, not to her face, though she thought for one reeling second that it might be, and brushed, very lightly, the flour from her sleeve where it had settled at the elbow, over the thin worn place in the cloth she was always careful no one saw. You've a hole here, he said quietly, in the elbow. I know where my holes are, Mr. Calloway, Elias. His hand was still at her sleeve, not gripping, just there, warm through the thin cloth, and neither of them moved, and the not moving was louder than anything either had said all week. Say it. Just once. You've said Calloway 40 times like it's a splinter you're getting out. Say the other one. Elias, she said. It came out of her softer than she meant it, and she watched it land on him, and something in his face opened that she was not ready to be responsible for. "There," he said. "That wasn't. There you both are." Marcus's voice came across the yard smooth and unhurried, and Elias's hand left her sleeve, and the whole charged air of the back step went out of it like heat off a drawn loaf. Marcus stood in the mouth of the bay with his folder against his chest and his soft gray shoes on the edge of the cobbles he despised, and he was smiling, and the smile had a new thing in it, patient and pleased. The smile of a man who has laid a card face down and is about to turn it. "Touching," he said. "Truly, Eli, I've the Harlow contracts wanting your signature before the courier goes at noon. Nothing sinister, the flower supply. Don't look at me like that. Miss Bexley." His eyes went to her bag, to the corner of cream just showing at its mouth where the rolled apron had shifted, and his smile deepened by exactly 1 degree. "You've had a chance to consider my little offer, I hope. No hurry. Only I'd hate for it to go stale in there next to your lunch." The yard went very quiet. Nora felt, rather than saw, Elias turn, felt the whole warm ease of him a moment ago go rigid at her side. "What offer?" he said. "The redundancy, of course." Marcus's surprise was a small, beautifully made thing. "The one you signed off last week before you drove out here on your delivery man adventure. N. Bexley, the walker, you called her, in the file. The one who'll cause trouble if she goes at all, so she goes first, cleanly, with money." "Your words, Eli, your instruction. I merely made it generous, as you asked, and delivered it, as you asked, so you wouldn't have to." He tilted his head, all mild puzzlement. "Have I spoken out of turn? I did rather assume the two of you had cleared the air. Given how much air you seem to be sharing." Nora did not move. The sun hammered down on the yard, and the pigeon had stopped, and somewhere inside the ovens ticked, and she stood on the back step with a cream envelope half out of her bag and looked at Elias Calloway. And Elias Calloway looked back at her with a face gone the color of raw dough, and said, "Nora, that's not last week," she said. "Nora," he said last week. Her voice was level. Anyone who knew her would have run. The file. The walker. You wrote that before you ever slowed the truck. She was not shaking now. She had gone past shaking into the cold, clear place beyond it. You knew my name from a file, not off the tag. You knew it in the city, on paper, before the crossing, before the coffee, before you sat there and let me do the voice and tell you it was the only honest air I had to breathe. You knew the whole 4 miles that you'd already decided I was the one who goes first. I hadn't decided anything. She goes first, cleanly, with money. Your words. She reached into her bag and drew the envelope out and held it up between them in the white light, and her hand did not tremble at all, which frightened her more than anything else that morning. You stood on this step 10 minutes ago and told me you gave me a vote. And it was already signed. It was in my bag while you touched my sleeve. She was not crying. She would sooner have walked into the ovens. You told me, to my face, on the road home, I'll not do it to you the way I did the truck. You'll see it coming, from me to your face. I meant it. It came from him, on paper. Dated before we ever met. She set the envelope down on the warm step between them, gently, the way she had shut the truck door, which was worse than throwing it. You did do it to me the way you did the truck. You just did it a week early, and let me carry it around all morning like a fool with a warm secret. She looked at him one last moment, at the flower on his jaw she had wanted to brush away, and something in her closed for good. The famous hands. Everything you said I was. You'd written me down before you'd met me, Mr. Calloway, That's not a man deciding. That's a man reading you your own sentence in a voice kind enough to make you thank him for it. Nora, if you'll let me, I've work. She stepped down off the back step, past him, past Marcus and his patient turned-over card, into the shimmering yard. Behind her she heard Elias say her name once more, low, and heard Marcus say something smooth, beginning with now, Eli. That's precisely why. And she did not stop to hear the rest of it, because if she stopped, she would break. And she had 6 miles of hammering afternoon tarmac ahead of her, and a jam jar at home, and a brother who'd underlined, "Don't send any more money." And not one single person in the whole hot, honest world she would let watch her go. She untied her apron before her shift was even done. She rolled it. She pushed it into her bag beside the tag with her name on it, the name he'd never needed to read because he'd had it a week, in a file under the word Walker. And she walked out through the gate into the flat white afternoon without looking back at the office windows, where she knew, without turning, that 2 men were standing, one of them saying it was decided, and the other one, at last, understanding exactly what he had let into the room. She was a mile down the empty road, past the crossing, at the place where the hedge closed in, and he had first slowed the truck in another life, when she heard the engine behind her. Heavier, newer, the diesel note deeper and better kept. Coming up the road slow, unhurried, matching her pace, the way it had on the first morning when she still had 2 good legs and no idea whose coffee she was about to drink. She did not step onto the verge this time. She walked down the center of the hot tarmac with her chin up and her bag on her shoulder, and she did not turn her head, and behind her the truck slowed and slowed, and finally stopped, and a door opened. And his voice came across the shimmering air, no longer certain of anything at all. "Nora, the date on that letter is a lie, and I can prove it, and if you get in this truck one more time, I will tell you the whole of it, and you can decide after, not before, after. That's all I'm asking. The 4 miles I owe you. To your face." And Nora Bexley stood in the middle of the road, with the heat coming up through the worn-through soles of her boots, and closed her eyes, and did not yet know whether she was going to keep walking or turn around. Only that whichever she chose, there would be no walking it back. She turned around. Later she could never say which muscle decided it, only that her feet, which had carried her 6 miles a day for 11 months and never once betrayed her, stopped in the middle of the hot tarmac and would not take the next step. The truck sat idling 20 feet back, dark green under the white glare, and Elias stood beside the open door with one hand still on the frame, not coming closer, waiting the way a man waits at a gate he knows he has no right to open. "The whole of it," she said. Her voice carried flat across the shimmer, "to my face. And if one word of it bends, I keep walking and you never slow this truck beside me again as long as you own the road." "Agreed. I'm not getting in." "Then I'll say it here." He let go of the frame. He came 3 steps onto the road and stopped, close enough that she could see the flour still along his jaw, the tiredness gone right through him now, no braced correction left in his face, nothing folded away. "Marcus wrote that letter. Every word of it. The date on it is last Tuesday. I did not have your name last Tuesday. I did not have any of your names. He said it was your instruction, your words. The Walker. They're his words in my mouth. He's good at that. You heard him do it on the floor, Mercy with a calculator. He talks in things that sound like they came from somewhere reasonable." A tractor droned behind the hedge and went quiet. "I got the Callaway staff files 2 days ago, Nora, Wednesday, after I'd already driven out here. You can check it. The courier logged them. There's a signature. There's a time. A man cannot instruct a redundancy by name a week before he's been given the names. That's not my word against his. That's a date against a date. She stood very still. The skylark had gone. Somewhere far off a dog barked twice and stopped. Then why, she said, were you here at 4 a.m? On a delivery truck, not telling him. Because I was checking him. And there it was, the real hesitation. The corner taken honestly this time, no correction. That's the part I couldn't say on the road home. I didn't come to decide whether to sell. I came because the numbers Marcus put in front of me for this place didn't sit right, and they hadn't sat right at Harlow either, and I'd started to wonder what a man like that costs a company when nobody's watching him from the shop floor. So I did the one thing he'd never expect. I got in a truck before dawn and drove the route myself, so I'd see the place with his hands off it. His voice dropped. And then a woman with resoled boots got in beside me and told me the true thing, and I stopped thinking about Marcus at all for 4 miles. That was the trick I played on you. Not the file. I let you think I was nobody because for 4 miles I wanted to be nobody. That's the whole of it, and it's uglier and smaller than a lie. Because it's just a man who liked being spoken to as if he mattered less than he does. The heat pressed down on both of them. Nora looked at him a long moment, and the cold, clear place she had walked into on the back step did not warm exactly, but it shifted, the way ice shifts on a pond before you know whether it will hold. Harlow, she said slowly. June said Harlow. The mill. Flats now, with a plaque. Marcus handled Harlow. And 2 before it. Elias's jaw tightened, every one of them an old family place. Every one of them sold to the same developer. And every one of them, Marcus told the family, was bleeding money it wasn't bleeding, until the sale, when it turned out to be worth a great deal to precisely one buyer who happened to send Marcus a consulting fee 3 months after the ink dried. He said it evenly, the way you report a wound you have already stopped bleeding from. I didn't know that last week either. I've spent this week finding it out. That's why I was slow to answer you on the road. I wasn't deciding whether to sell Calloway's. I was deciding whether I could prove what my own man had been doing to me with my grandfather's name. Nora's hands had gone quite still on the strap of her bag. Down the road the wood pigeon started up again in some invisible tree, and the ordinariness of it. That sound, on this road, on this morning, made the whole thing tilt into something she could nearly stand up in. And can you, she said, prove it, as of this morning? He looked at her, and for the first time all week there was something underneath the tiredness that was almost fear. The developer's letter came to the hotel. Marcus doesn't know I have it. It names the fee, and it names Calloway's, and it's dated 3 weeks ago, before I ever drove out here, before he'd set one shoe on a cobble he despises. He'd already sold this place in his head. The redundancy letter in your bag isn't the start of a plan, Nora. It's the last brick in one. And he made it generous, and he brought it to the quickest pair of hands first, because he told me himself, weeks ago, in the city, that the way you close a place quietly is you buy the one the others trust, and you let grief do the rest. Start with the walker, she said. If she goes quietly, the rest follow. His plan. Never mine. He held her eyes. I gave you a vote this morning, and I meant it. And it was already signed under me by a man robbing me. And I didn't know, and that is not an excuse. It's just where the fault actually sits, and you deserve to have it sit there and not on you. He took a breath. So here's what I'm asking, and it's the only thing. Come back with me. Not to work, you're off the clock, you've every right to walk home and never look at either of us again. Come back and stand in that office while I turn his card over in front of him. Because he built this to happen quietly and behind closed doors, and I want the one person he tried to buy standing in the room with the door open when it doesn't. For a moment, the road held its breath. Nora thought of the cream envelope still warm in her bag from the whole of the morning, and of the jam jar, and of her brother's underlined line, and of Dot saying, "Now we know what you look like," and of old Mr. Calloway, who had carried every name on that floor to the end in wood. She was suddenly and completely certain have wanted her in that room. "I'll not get in the truck," she said. Elias's shoulders dropped a fraction, the last hope going out of him, and then she added, "But I'll walk the mile back. And you'll walk it beside me, and you'll tell me the rest, and if it holds all the way to the gate, I'll stand in your office, and I'll watch you do it." She hitched the bag higher on her shoulder. "And you'll leave the truck here on the verge, like a man who can manage a mile on his own 2 feet for once in his life." Something moved at the corner of his mouth, not quite the almost smile, but the ghost of where it lived. "That's fair," he said. "It's a mile in this heat in those shoes. It's not fair at all." That's rather the point. He left the truck on the verge with the door shut and the keys in his pocket, and they walked the mile back together into the sun, and it did hold, all of it, every date and every name, the whole ugly small architecture of it laid out, step by step, on the hot tarmac between the hawthorn hedges, and by the time the Calloway gate came up on the left, its low bakehouse breathing crust and yeast into the white afternoon, Nora Bexley had stopped being a woman deciding whether to believe him and become a woman deciding what she was going to do about it. They came in through the loading bay and not the office, and the floor felt them arrive the way a floor does. Fenwick looked up from the ovens. June, who had stayed past her hours on some invented errand with the proving racks, went still with a peel in her hand. Dot set down a tray very softly, which for Dot was a fanfare. "Fenwick," Elias said, "is Mr. Wren still in the office?" "On the telephone, sir. Has been an hour. Door shut." Fenwick's eyes went from Elias to Nora and back, reading weather better than any of them. "Everything as it should be?" "Not yet." Elias looked round the floor once, at all of them, flowery and wary and his. "But it's about to be. I'd like you all where you are. Nothing to do. Just where you are." He turned to Nora. "Ready?" "No," she said, and walked to the office door anyway, which was, she thought, the truest thing she'd said all week. The office was cool and dim after the ovens, blinds half down against the glare, and Marcus Wren sat behind old Mr. Calloway's desk with his feet not quite on it and the telephone at his ear. And when the door opened, he lifted one finger, at Elias, at the owner, to say, "Wait, I'm speaking." Then he saw Nora behind him, and the folder, and something in Elias's stillness, and he said into the receiver, smooth as a poured thing, "I'll call you back. Yes, before noon. It's all in hand, and set it down." "Well," he said, leaning back. "The delivery man returns, and he's brought a poet. Have you come to sign the Harlow flower contracts, Eli, or are we having a scene? Because I've a courier at 12, and scenes do run over. Sit where you are, Marcus." Elias did not raise his voice. He crossed to the desk and laid a single sheet of paper on it, face up, turned so Marcus could read it. "Tell me what that is." Marcus glanced down. He was very good. Only a man watching for it would have seen the half-second where his eyes stopped moving. "That," he said, "is a letter from Halbrook Developments, congratulating themselves by the look of it." "Where did you get the hotel's post?" "It's addressed to me. It's my post." Elias's finger came down on a line halfway. Read that figure aloud. I don't read aloud. I'm not on your floor. The smile stayed. Eli, whatever this is, it's a misunderstanding dressed up for an audience, and the audience is going to feel very foolish in about 10 minutes when I explain the flower supply chain and everyone remembers I'm the reason this place is solvent enough to argue about. Send the woman out. This is company business. She stays. Elias's voice did not move. That figure is a fee. Paid to a consultancy that has one director, and the director is you, and it's paid 3 months after every old family bakery and mill you've understood for me sold to Halbrook at a price you told me was generous and told them was a steal. He set a second sheet down and a third. Harlow, Denby, the Ashcombe Granary. 3 plaques. Marcus, 3 fees. And this one, the 4th sheet, dated 3 weeks ago, is Halbrook thanking you in advance for Callaway's. 3 weeks ago, before I drove out here, before you'd ever seen a cobble. You'd sold it before you'd smelled it. The office was very quiet. Out on the floor the ovens ticked. Nora stood by the door and did not move and watched the card turn over. Marcus laughed, lightly, beautifully, a man declining to be ruffled. That's a consulting relationship, and it's disclosed, and it's legal, and you signed the engagement letter yourself 2 years ago because you couldn't be bothered to read past the fee cap. He spread his hands. You want to be angry at someone, Eli. Be angry at the version of you who hired me to do the parts you find unpleasant. I have been very good at those parts. This is one of them. He nodded, almost kind, toward Nora. Closing the walker. You'd never have had the stomach. You proved that this morning on a back step with your hand on her sleeve. So I did it for you. That's the arrangement. That's always been the arrangement. Say that again, Nora said. Marcus turned his head to her, unhurried. Which part? The part where he'd never have had the stomach. She came off the door and set her canvas bag on the desk, on the clean corner Dot wiped twice, and drew out the cream envelope and laid it beside the 4 sheets. You told me this was his instruction, his words. She goes first, cleanly, with money. You told me, on the floor, Mr. Callaway signs what I put in front of him. She looked at him levelly. But you've just told him he never wrote it, that you did it because he'd never have the stomach. Both can't be true, Mr. Wren. Either he ordered it or you did it behind him. You've said both this morning to 2 different people in the 2 different voices you keep for us. I heard the one you keep for the floor. He's just heard the one you keep for the boss. They don't match, and I'll say so to anyone in either of them for as long as it takes. For the first time the smile went out of Marcus Wren's face, all at once, like heat off a drawn loaf. You've no idea, he said softly, how a company works. No, Nora agreed. But I know exactly what a thing costs. You said so yourself, with your little watch. A woman who understands what a thing costs. She did not raise her voice. She had never once raised it. This cost you the room. That's what it cost. Elias put the 5th sheet on the desk. It was a courier log, a signature, a time-stamped Wednesday. Your redundancy letter is dated last Tuesday and instructs me by staff name, he said. I was given the staff names on Wednesday. There's the log. There's the hour. He straightened. You backdated it, Marcus. You forged an instruction from me by name against a file I didn't have, so that when it went wrong, it would go wrong under my hand and not yours. That's not consulting. There's no fee cap I signed that covers that. And you did it to buy the one person on this floor everyone else trusts, so grief would close the place quietly, and Halbrook would thank you in 90 days. He gathered the sheets. You're finished here. not the floor. You, Marcus stood. He buttoned his soft gray jacket, an unhurried gesture, a man declining to be hurried even now. And for a moment Nora saw what he must have looked like in every other office he had done this in, walking out clean while the plaque went up behind him. "You'll regret this by autumn," he said. "You'll be back on the telephone to me by autumn. Because sentiment doesn't balance, and poets don't count, and when the Dawn premium eats your margin, you'll remember I offered you the quick, kind way." He picked up his leather folder. "Enjoy your honest air, Eli. It's the most expensive thing you own." "Leave the folder," Elias said. Marcus stopped. "The folder's company property. So is the stopwatch. So is every file on every one of my grandfather's places you've been pricing for Halbrook. You'll leave them on the desk, and you'll walk out through the loading bay, not the front, because the loading bay is where the work is, and I want the last thing you see of Calloway's to be 6 people doing it." Elias held out his hand. The folder, Marcus. For a long moment nothing happened. The ovens ticked. Then Marcus Wren set the folder down on old Mr. Calloway's desk, set it down softly, the way Nora had set the truck door, which was worse than throwing it, and laid the small silver stopwatch on top of it, and walked out onto the floor without a word. The dawn shift watched him go. Nobody said anything. He picked his way between the flour drifts in his shoes that resented the cobbles, and at the mouth of the loading bay he had to step round Dot, who did not move an inch to let him, and out into the white heat, and he was gone. Dot looked at the space where he'd been. "Well," she said, "there goes a man who never once found out what the proving room was for." And the floor let out a breath it had been holding for a week, a loose, glad, flowery noise, and Fenwick pulled his cap off and put it straight back on and said, "First couriers at 12, we've loaves to load." Because he could not be seen to be moved, and the mixers came back up, and the whole hot, honest world of the place turned over and went on. Nora did not go with it. She stood in the cool, dim office with her empty bag and the cream envelope still on the desk beside the folder. And she found that her hands, which had been steady through the whole of it, had begun at last to shake, now that there was no one left to be steady for. Elias saw. Of course he saw. He had been reading her from a moving truck since the crossing. But he did not come round the desk, and he did not reach for her, and she was grateful for it in a way she could not have said. "You didn't have to come back," he said. "You could have let a letter be his last word. You'd have been within your rights." "I don't like other people having the last word." Her voice was not quite level now. "It's a defect of character." "Ask June. I'd rather ask you." He came round the desk then, slowly, and stopped an arm's length off, the careful distance. And he looked at her with the flower still on his jaw and the whole tired week of it in his face. "I owe you 4 miles, Nora. I've been trying to give them back to you since dawn, and I keep handing you fresh reasons to walk instead. So I'll not make a speech. I'll just say the true thing, since you're the one who taught me it's the only thing worth saying to a stranger, and then I'll let you decide whether I'm still one. Say it, then. I profiled you as a problem, in a file, in the city, weeks ago. A name and a word, Walker. A woman who'd cause trouble if she went. His jaw worked. And then I met the woman. And she got in a truck she'd refused for 11 months, and drank my coffee under protest, and told me the place I'd been taught to see as a margin was the only honest air she had to breathe. And she was right. About all of it. About the proving room and the car park and the 6 of you at 5 o'clock. Right in a way no consultant in a gray suit has ever once been right in my hearing. He took a breath. I came here to price a building. I'm not selling it. Not because it balances, it barely does. Because I finally met someone who knew what it was worth, and it turned out not to be a number at all. Nora's throat had gone tight. Outside, faintly, the first courier van backed up to the bay with its reversing note, and someone laughed. And the ordinary morning went on being ordinary all around the extraordinary thing happening in the dim office. "You touched my sleeve," she said, "with that in my bag." "I know." "The hole in my elbow." "I know, Nora." His voice cracked on it, just slightly, the corrected corner going honestly wrong at last. "I'd give a great deal to have not done it in that order. I can't. All I can do is the order from here." She looked at him a long moment. Then she picked the cream envelope up off the desk, and she did not open it, and she did not tear it. She held it out to him. 3 months' wages, she said. A reference in your own hand. Enough to mend the car in Marsh's yard. She watched his face. He read all of that off a file too. My brother, my aunt's hip, the head gasket. "You people know everything about us except the one thing that matters, which is that we'd every one of us hand the money back to keep the 5 o'clock start." She set the envelope in his hand and closed his fingers over it, briefly, the only time she touched him. "I don't want his quiet way. I don't want your reference. I want my job, and I want the shift, and I want it in the light, in front of the floor, the way you turned his card over, not in an envelope. You have it. All of it. The shift's decided, in front of everyone, this morning. You heard me." He looked down at the envelope in his hand. But not the same job. Her chin came up. Meaning Marcus was right about one thing, and it cost him nothing to be right about it. You're a full third faster than anyone on that floor, and your loaves rise truer, and the whole shift turns to your table like plants to a window. He set the envelope down. "My grandfather knew every name on that floor, because he stood on it. I don't know them, because I've never stood anywhere but a city office learning to find the poets and take them off the sheet. I need someone who knows what a thing costs to sit on the other side of this desk from whoever comes after Marcus and say no when no is the true answer." He met her eyes. "It's more money and worse hours, and you'd still make the dawn bake because you'd never let anyone else prove the first 40. And you'd never once have to ask for a ride, because part of the wage is the car. Mended in your name, so the 6 miles are yours to walk when you love them and drive when you don't." For a moment, Nora Bexley, who had walked 6 miles at dawn for 11 months rather than open the door of asking, could not speak at all. "That's charity," she managed, dressed up as a promotion. "It's the opposite. It's me finally being unable to afford not to have you." The almost smile came, full now, tired and real. "You'd be doing me the mercy this time. Ask Dot. She'll tell you I've no idea what I'm holding. You said it yourself, on the road, the first morning, a man who never smelled the flower won't understand what he's got." He spread his hands, the young man's gesture in the old man's building. "So teach me." From the other side of the desk. With the door open. Nora looked at the sheets on the desk, and the stopwatch that no longer belonged to anyone, and the dim, cool office where old Mr. Calloway had carried every name to the end, and out through the half-blind at the white gold yard, where the courier van was loading, and June had her face pressed shamelessly to the loading bay glass, and she felt the whole tilted week come, at last, to rest on something level. "I'll think about it," she said. "That's not a no." "No," she agreed, and heard the ghost of him in it, and saw him hear it too. "It's not a no. Ask me on Friday." "It is Friday." "Then ask me tomorrow," said Nora, "and I'll have thought about it, and I'll say yes, and you'll not make it strange." She picked up her empty bag. And you'll walk out onto that floor now and tell them Wren's gone, and the shift's safe, and the morning bake's staying in this building. Because Fenwick will have worked half of it out and got the other half wrong, and Dot's about to tell everyone I've been given the sack and the sky's falling, and I'll not have my good news be everyone's confusion. She paused at the door. You start with the walker. Isn't that what he said? If she stays, the rest follow. The bakehouse took them both back into its heat and its flour and its wall of good yeasty warmth. And Elias stood by the ovens and told the floor plainly, in the light, that Marcus Wren no longer worked for Calloway's, that the dawn shift stayed, that the morning bake was made here by these hands and going nowhere, and this time when the floor came up glad and loose around him. Nora Bexley let it wash over her, and, to June's open-mouthed astonishment, joined it. The car came out of Marsh's yard on a Tuesday 3 weeks later, its head gasket mended and its bodywork washed to a shine it had not worn in years, and Nora drove it 6 miles to Calloway's at 4:15 with the windows down and the summer dark going gray over the hayfields and the skylarks not yet up. And she found she missed the walk, a little, the way you miss a hard thing that was yours, and found also that she could stop on the wide verge starred with clover and get out and stand in it for 5 minutes with the milky green smell in the back of her throat, and then drive on and have both. That was the part nobody had ever told her about managing. You could put a thing down and still keep it. Aunt Pemberton took to the car like a duchess to a carriage. She rearranged the tinned things one last triumphant time and declared the box officially retired, and on Sundays Nora drove her out past the mill to the river, and they ate sandwiches on a bench that did not care what anyone earned. The jam jar came off the shelf. What went into it now was petrol money, and then, when Robert wrote that the bursary had come through after all and to please stop, it became a jar for nothing in particular, which is the best kind of jar a house can have. Robert came home at the end of term to see the mended car and the workshop thing he'd made, which turned out to be a bread crock, turned and glazed with his own hands. A little lopsided, entirely beautiful. For the good flour, he said, gruff with pride, not the tinned rubbish, and Aunt Pemberton laughed until she had to sit down, and Nora put it in the middle of the kitchen table, where the light from the window landed on it in the evenings, and it held exactly 1 dawn shift's worth of the morning bake, which she now signed off from the other side of a desk with the door open. She did say yes, on the Saturday, 1 day late on purpose, and she did not make it strange, and neither did he. It went slowly, the way the best proving does, all that summer and into the gold of the autumn, a man learning to stand on a floor, and a woman learning that asking was not a door that could never close, but only a thing you did, sometimes, with someone worth the doing. He made his first joke on the floor in September, a dry small thing about the proving room thermostat having more opinions than Dot. And Dot threatened him with the tins, and Nora laughed so suddenly she got flour on her own nose, and Elias reached over, without a word, and brushed it off, over the place where a hole in her sleeve had once been, mended now, in thread that almost matched. They were not in any hurry. There was bread to make, and half a county to feed before breakfast, and a name over the door that meant, once again, exactly what old Mr. Calloway had built it to mean. But on the last warm evening of that summer, when the shift was long out and the ovens ticking down to cool, Elias found her on the back step with 2 mugs and sat beside her without being asked, and bumped her shoulder the way June did, and they watched the light go down gold over the yard. "I've been thinking," he said about that first morning, 6 miles, in resoled boots, and you'd have walked every one of them before you'd have got in beside a stranger. I know what I'd have done. I was there. I'm only saying. The almost smile. The most stubborn woman in the county. And here you are, sat still, not walking anywhere. Nora Bexley looked out at the yard where the heat came up off the cobbles in the last of the light, and at the road beyond the gate that ran out between the hayfields toward the town, 6 miles of it, hers now to drive or to walk exactly as she chose, and she leaned her shoulder very slightly into his. "I'm not sat still," she said. "I got where I was going. There's a difference." She drank her tea. A stranger slowed a truck beside me in the dark, and I told him I'd 2 good legs, and I meant it, and I was right. The blackbird ran down its evening scale in the wall tree, the same bird or its brother, tuning itself against the coming quiet. I just never said the legs had to walk it alone. And the sun went down over Callaway's, and the smell of the day's last loaves stood warm in the air, and somewhere down the road the larks came in to roost over the clover that would be starred with dew again by 3:45, when a woman who no longer had to would rise in the blue dark and go gladly to put her hands in the morning. If this story warmed you even half as much as that dawn bread warmed Nora's hands, stay a moment with us. Subscribe, and let the next one find you at the top of your morning. There's always another road, another slowed engine in the half-dark, another true heart worth the waiting. We'll see you down it.